Here are some tips and tricks I'd like to offer from the magistrate's perspective. The magistrate first reviews offenders for suitability, and once assessed as suitable, the Aboriginal Community Justice Group, consisting of respected community members, also determines an offender's acceptability. Now, this is important because regardless of whether it's true or not, allegations will be made, allegations regarding favouritism and softer penalties. Community consultation should be undertaken, such as addressing the local Chamber of Commerce or other community organisations. You know the greatest single risk to injustice in a legal context is ineffective communication. It's therefore imperative that the magistrate be alert to not only Aboriginal community concerns, but also the expectations and perceptions of the wider community. It's crucial that the magistrate be the gatekeeper. Artificial boundaries always create problems. Circle sentencing should be conducted in a way that is not unduly formal, so as to encourage open and honest dialogue. Remember, you will get better results if people are allowed to express themselves in the way they know how, not in some way which is foreign to them. The magistrate must also be careful to avoid deliberations turning into a feel-good session. The purposes of punishment remain a relevant sentencing consideration. You will probably find that some elders are reluctant to send their young wayward youth off to some different town to be locked away. Whilst the process empowers the elders, the magistrate will need to find the balance in a thoughtful and careful manner. It's also important to remember here that the sentencing options remain the same. It's the route taken to sentence that's different and is more culturally appropriate. To this end, the elders will need to have tuition from the magistrate as to sentencing considerations and sentencing structures. It's really important that time be given to elder education. Which brings me to the vexed question that I'm sure magistrates will have to find solutions to: the selection of appropriate elders for each case. The project officer's role is key for the following reasons. The project officer needs to possess a knowledge of the communities. You will already know that Indigenous communities have a complex system of relationships and politics and can quite often have disturbances or conflicts among themselves, which can impact upon the choice of elders for a particular case. The project officer requires skill in communicating with Indigenous people. There will be a lot of information to be communicated and a lot of arrangements to be made. Appointments will be made at specific times. A good project officer will need to know the tricks of the trade to make this all come together. The project officer also needs to know what support agencies and services are available in a local community and have a good rapport with those services. You can see the role of the project officer is pivotal to success. Anyone setting up a circle sentencing court should know that the elders, offender, victims, support persons are all volunteers. The fact that nobody's being paid lends integrity to this process. Payment could lead to factions within the community where some would complain that others are being paid more and so forth. I hope these few tips help you.
The project officer has to figure out who to approach to be the right elders for each case. They have to have a Koori art, a lot of wisdom, common sense and logic. You have to study each individual case to identify the issues that will be raised in the circle. You've got to discuss this with the magistrate to identify which elders will be familiar with those issues. I'm not brilliant myself, but I am good at spotting brilliant people. And those elders, they are brilliant the way that they do what they do in the court. My job is to then go out and suss out who will be the right one. You have to be aware of the factions in the communities. If you don't choose wisely, you could have friction about things that will affect the circle. The project officer will have to communicate frequently with the participants to make sure that they will turn up at the right time. This takes a lot of time. Most project officers have to do a fair bit of backtracking to go out searching for offenders and victims. They are usually the most disadvantaged of our people, and you need to be communicating with them constantly. I think it's important for the project officer to have a courier. That way you can be sensitive to the needs of your people. If you are raised as a courier, you will have that courier. And finally, it is important that the project officer and elders provide support for offenders once they have been sentenced. Things like explaining to them how to pay off their fines so they can get their licence, so that they can get to TAFE. You have to link them with support organisations. However, you have to be careful not to come across as policing their situation. This would get them and their communities offside. If you get the community offside, you've got no circle.
Being a project officer, to me, it's a real specialist role, and you need to work with a lot of people, but mainly your community. You need to know your community. You need to have ties within your community. You need to understand about factions and families within the community, so you're able to step out of that as well and build people's trust, because there's many factions within the Aboriginal community, and we need to break down them barriers. And the circle sentencing to work, you need the whole community representation and support. For the process for circle to be successful, the main thing we need is our elders. And traditionally, our elders are the people who guide us through our lives. We take advice from them and etc. You can't rush talking with elders. You can't just ring up and say, I need you at 5 o'clock next Wednesday, bye-bye. You've got to spend a lot of time developing relationships and yarning, and that's where the magistrates also need to take into account to slow the process down, to build their trust as well, because historically relationships with Aboriginal people and the judiciary and police have not been very good in the past, and it's trying to develop that relationship and trust. When I'm thinking about forming a circle with the offender, what I need to establish is who they look up to within the community, but also it's not only who they look up to, but we also need to also match that person with a particular elder as well, who's going to know a lot about their problems, and also that they can not so much trick a person up, but you can't tell lies to elders. To be a project officer, it's a hard slog. You need to have certain skills. You need to have a lot of patience. You need to have good communication skills, because we're talking to people on many different levels. We're talking to magistrates, we're talking to the community people, we're talking to solicitors. I mean, you name it. We're constantly trying to sell circle. And making people feel, as well as magistrates and community, that they've got a vested interest in circle, that what we're going to get out of it is much more than what we're actually putting into it. And like a co-worker of mine says, the rippling effects can be great. They can be huge, and you're not only going to help that offender, you're going to help an entire family and community as well.
I get goosebumps talking about circle sentencing, because I think it's the best thing that's come out of the Attorney General's department for a long time. At the end of the day, it's putting the onus back on the community to have a say, in what's happening in their community and with their people. It's a good thing for them to be able to deal with their own people. The magistrates need to be willing to hand over their powers to those Aboriginal elders and respected people that are sitting on the circle courts, to give them, to help them, and it helps them build their status in the community too. Magistrates need to consider them as quasi-judicial officers, because they are actually in collaboration with him determining the sentence that's going to be handed down. The relationship with the police service is really important. The police, when I first started out, believed that it was another soft option for blackfellas. It's clearly not. Having the police involved, they actually get to see that is the case. Elders they get to actually see the Aboriginal men and women showing all that respect for the Aboriginal elders in their community. That helps the police's attitude to change and turns them around. I have had some really good results in my area. I am at the stage where I'm getting young police officers straight out of the police academy coming to actually sit on the circles with the local prosecutor. I think it's a good thing. In respect to the elders and respected people that sit on the circle sentencing courts, I believe you need to have a lot on your books. Bearing in mind, these elders and respected people do volunteer their time, and it's good to have a lot of them, because if you don't, you're going to be using the same ones and you're going to burn them out, which is not a good thing. We need to look after those people that are providing that service. It's been really difficult because a big part of the job in setting up Circle was all about dispelling myths. There's still a lot of myths out there about circle sentencing, and we have to be very clear about that. We've got to work hard. Project officers have got to work really hard in their communities to actually get, this program up and running to its full potential. A good project officer needs to be very talented, because there are so many hats that a project officer has to wear. There's a lot of things. It's not just actually sitting down in a circle court. There's the defendant, the accused in the matters, and looking after them and their support people. There's finding the victims and speaking to them, making them feel comfortable enough to actually want to come and sit in the circle and be a part of the process, because they don't get to have that say in a local court. Victims are usually, a lot of the times never there.
The first thing I would say to other prosecutors is leave your traditional approach to prosecuting at the door. There is no opportunity for you to object or to enter into any legal argument. The magistrate does steer the court process, but the dialogue is effectively in a fluid state and all participants can and do contribute. In a fashion that would ordinarily cut across a number of fundamental legal principles and acts, not the least of which is the Evidence Act. So, in summary, you need to keep a very open mind. No two circles will ever be the same. The second point I'd like to make is stay calm, be patient, and demonstrate your faith in the elders by allowing them to take the lead in the direction of the discussions and ultimately arriving at the sentencing proposal. This does not mean you are not to remain vigilant. You are perhaps to remain more vigilant in this setting than any other setting that I've experienced as a prosecutor. You must be inherently aware of the community's expectations on sentencing for the particular criminal offences that are before the court on a case-by-case basis. That does involve researching ahead of time as to what those expectations are. That does involve talking to the community from time to time, and it does involve accessing contemporary sentencing guidelines. Do not be afraid to remind the circle on behalf of the community, if and only if the need arises, that this is a sentencing court. None of us believe this is a feel-good session. The punishment must fit the crime. It cannot be manifestly inadequate or excessive. It also ought to serve as a specific and general deterrent for all to see. It is essential that the sentence process itself is addressed first and foremost. After this is done, then the welfare and rehabilitation processes of the offender should be addressed.